Hello everyone. I'm Katy Rains, CEO of Indigo. I'm a white woman with blonde medium length hair wearing a black and white dress. Thank you for coming along today. I'm delighted that we're going to be able to share with you the findings from our first Access Culture survey. But before we start, I want to cover a few practical things. If you would like to use the live captions, you can do so by pressing the button that has CC in a box on it. It's on the bar at the bottom of your screen, and you can change the size of the captions to suit you. We also have two BSL interpreters with us today, Lane and Danielle. They will be visible to all throughout the session and available on the recording as well. Thank you both for being here. If anyone is having any issues at any point, please use the chat and my colleague Ellie will try to help. We are recording this webinar and we'll send the recording out to you tomorrow. We will also have a full report which will contain everything you see today, plus a lot more detail, and that will be posted on our website very soon. We're aiming to run through the research by about 2:15 so that we have some time to take questions at the end, and we're aiming to be finished at 2:30. Please do put any questions as we go along that you have in the chat, and my colleague Ellie will be gathering those up for us to respond to later. So, Access Culture is an Indigo Share Hot Topics survey. Many of you will have been involved in our previous Hot Topics surveys, such as Act Green, Tomorrow's Audience, and our COVID research after the interval and missing audiences. With all of our hot topics, we're trying to bring the audience voice into an issue affecting the whole sector, particularly one that perhaps has been under-researched before, so that we can help you to really put the needs of audiences at the heart of your decision-making on important issues such as sustainability, new and lapsed audiences, and technology. And today we're turning our attention to access and accessibility in cultural organisations. We're so grateful to pointOne EPOS for their sponsorship of this survey, because that has enabled us to make it completely free to any organisation who wanted to take part. And we're also grateful to Phil Lofthouse and the team at All In, the new arts access scheme for deaf, disabled and neurodivergent people in the UK and Ireland. Phil and I first talked about doing a piece of research like this back in 2022, when All In was just being devised. Now, whilst we at Indigo might be audience experts, we admit that we're not access or disability specialists. So we were keen to also learn more about how we could make our processes and research at Indigo more accessible. The team at All In have helped us to develop the questions, consult with disabled people, and test the user experience to try and make it as accessible as possible. We have learned a lot from them, so thank you. Phil will give us his reflections on the research later on and what he thinks it means for the All In programme. And Alex from pointOne will join us for a Q&A at the end. I'm pleased to welcome the members of my Indigo team who've worked on this project, Jacob and Ellie, who's behind the scenes on the Q&A today, as well as Alex Morgan from pointOne, our sponsors, and Phil Lofthouse from All In. But before I hand over to Jacob to walk you through the findings, I want to show you who we heard from in this survey. We had almost 20,000 responses from 85 participating organisations, with a good spread across the country and from a range of art forms. It's a pretty engaged respondent set, with over 90% attending something cultural at least every few months, and 2/3 of them are over 55. We asked respondents how they identified in relation to disability, neurodivergence, health and support. These were not mutually exclusive options, as of course someone could identify as having a disability and a long-term health condition. And we also asked if people were answering for themselves or on behalf of a disabled person. For simplicity of reporting, we've taken the broadest grouping of anyone who identifies as a disabled person or neurodivergent, has a long-term health condition, is a carer or support worker for a disabled person, and who is answering the survey on their behalf. And throughout the report, we refer to these people as disabled visitors. And for people who say they identify as a non-disabled person and not answering on behalf of a disabled person, we refer to these people as non-disabled visitors. So, using these groupings, our respondents are 56% disabled visitors and 44% non-disabled visitors. For comparison purposes, the 56% of disabled visitors compares with 11% who identify as disabled in our Indigo Share Audience Tracker surveys for 24-25 and 18% in the England and Wales census. We're going to look at 5 different areas that influence how accessible cultural venues and events are. In each section, we will show what the key differences are for disabled and non-disabled visitors, and then we'll dig into some of the details around what specifically the greatest needs are and what we might do about them. So firstly, we're going to look at how people find and access information before they attend, then how they book for cultural events, thirdly, physical access to venues, how confident people feel to go to a new venue or to take someone with access requirements to an event. And finally, what part technology might play for them in the booking and the venue experience. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Jacob to walk you through those findings.
Hello, I'm Jacob Barnes, consultant at Indigo. I'm a white man with short brown hair. I'm wearing a white t-shirt and red overshirt. In this section, we'll explore the common challenges disabled visitors face when looking for information and what venues can do to improve this process. The first interesting finding is that disabled visitors are much more likely to research a venue before attending, with 75% always checking accessibility information, compared to just 44% of non-disabled visitors. That's a 31 percentage point difference. This tells us that attending a cultural venue often requires more planning for disabled visitors. While non-disabled visitors may be able to decide last minute, those with access requirements need reassurance in advance that the venue will accommodate them. However, even though disabled visitors are likely to be researching the venue before they go, most of them find it hard to access the information they need. 71% versus 39% for non-disabled visitors. This is a significant issue. Despite actively looking, many visitors cannot easily access key details about accessibility, facilities, or transport. This can lead to frustration, uncertainty, and in some cases, deciding not to attend at all, as we'll see a bit later. And the logical conclusion of that is that disabled visitors are 3 times more likely to call the venue to try and get information they have struggled to access. And as we'll see in a moment, this can cause further difficulties too. When we asked audiences what information they were looking for, it broadly fell into 4 categories: accessibility and mobility. Many visitors check for step-free access, lifts, ramps, and wheelchair-friendly spaces. Details on walking distances, handrails, and clear routes also matter. Facilities. Accessible toilets are a key priority, but visitors also look for quiet spaces and places to rest, which can make a venue more welcoming. Parking and transport. Information on blue badge parking, proximity to public transport, and the ease of getting from the car park to the venue is essential for many. And event and venue details. Some visitors check for seating plans, sightlines, and legroom, while others want to know about event duration, intervals, and crowd levels to ensure a comfortable visit. This highlights the level of detail disabled visitors require to feel confident attending. If venues don't provide this information clearly, it can create unnecessary barriers. And when we asked people what they found difficult in terms of accessing the information, these were the recurring themes. Website navigation. Complicated websites making it hard to even locate the information. As we mentioned a moment ago, the ability to speak to a member of staff before visiting can be hard due to long wait times, and sometimes the staff don't have the answers the visitor is looking for. And the level of detail not being sufficient. Each of these barriers adds uncertainty and frustration, making it harder for disabled visitors to confidently plan their visit. Now, let's move on to the next key theme, booking for cultural events. Many non-disabled visitors can already find booking a ticket something of a challenging process, but for many disabled visitors, this step is significantly more complex. A significant proportion of disabled visitors book online, although this is lower than for non-disabled visitors, and are much more likely than non-disabled visitors to find this difficult. This highlights a significant accessibility gap in the digital booking systems. While non-disabled visitors can typically book tickets with ease, disabled visitors often face extra steps, unclear processes, or barriers that make booking far more challenging. The main areas of feedback in relation to online booking were not being able to book accessible seats online. Many venues insist that people call to do this, which creates a big time and convenience barrier that just doesn't exist for people not requiring these seats. Inconsistency across venues. Respondents told us that different venues require different information from them, which is time-consuming and frustrating. Website functionality. This came up again, as did lack of direct support. Although some mentioned ticket agents who may be unfamiliar with the venue, or email boxes which aren't replied to for many days or weeks. And in relation specifically to people's ability to communicate any access needs they had during the online booking process, 91% of disabled visitors had not been fully able to do this. This was due to three main factors. The need to prove eligibility. Again, inconsistency across different venues or eligibility schemes. And poor recognition for people with specific or non-visible disabilities. For many disabled visitors, proving eligibility for accessible tickets adds an extra step to the booking process. As well as coming up a lot in the free text comments, we also asked specific questions around proving eligibility and how easy it was to do so. 78% of disabled visitors have had to prove their eligibility at some point, but 25% of people have found this very or fairly difficult. This means that for a significant number of visitors, accessing the tickets they need isn't straightforward. It requires additional effort just to prove they are entitled to them. And this isn't easy either. So, now we're moving on to the physical accessibility of venues. Well, the good news is that on average, we're doing better than other public spaces and facilities, which includes taxis, trains, hotels, restaurants, and so on. And these will be detailed out in the full report. This is something that was also the case for accessing information and for booking. But some types of cultural spaces are more difficult to access than others, with arenas being the most difficult and libraries the least, and theatres and festivals somewhere in the middle. Suitable seating not being available is a barrier for over half of disabled respondents, with transport and poor physical access also scoring quite highly, perhaps as we might expect. But it's also interesting to see things like a lack of confidence in their needs being met and feeling unwelcome coming up as well. Some of the things disabled audiences told us when we asked them what else made attending difficult included other physical barriers, such as the wheelchair spaces not being in a good position or being blocked by people standing in front of them. Financial constraints, especially if a carer ticket is not free. Disappointingly, the attitudes of staff or public at the venue. And a crowded or busy environment. So let's return to this point about a lack of confidence in needs being met and what information or communication might help with that. Disabled visitors are not terribly confident that their needs will be met. And when they go to a cultural venue, which almost 40% saying not very or not confident at all. But producing the right kinds of information could really help to build that confidence. Videos and photos are the most useful way for people to access the information, with social and visual stories also playing a part. Here's an example of one of the visual stories that the National Theatre produces for all its productions, giving clear details about what to expect at both the venue and the production itself. In terms of physical access, accessible toilets and step-free access are unsurprisingly the most important. But things like recognition of priority passes and sunflower lanyards and the provision of quiet spaces are also important. Adaptations for performances are also welcomed by many, including, in many cases, by non-disabled audiences. For example, captioned events have been used by almost as many people who do not identify as disabled as those who do. Our final section looks at technology in cultural venues, how visitors use digital tools and whether these systems are truly accessible for disabled audiences. Technology plays an increasing role in visitor experiences, from QR codes and mobile ordering to self-service kiosks and digital programs. While these tools can make things more efficient, they also introduce new barriers if they are not designed with accessibility in mind. This slide shows how both disabled and non-disabled visitors engage with technology in cultural venues. A key finding here is that more disabled visitors than non-disabled visitors use technology to order refreshments, whether via mobile devices or self-service kiosks. This is something we also saw in one of our previous hot topics with pointOne, which explored self-service technology in venues. Many disabled visitors, particularly those who are neurodivergent, told us that ordering at a counter can feel overwhelming and time pressured. And others found it physically challenging to get into the bar and back to their seats. For these visitors, self-service technology is not just a convenience. It's an enabler, allowing them to order at their own pace, or without the stress of a crowded queue. So, where technology is created with the needs of the audience in mind, it's encouraging to see audiences embrace its use. I'll now hand back over to Katy, who will take us through the key takeaways from the research and what this means for venues moving forward.
Thanks, Jacob. There is a lot more detail in the report when that's available, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of the sorts of things that we found. So I just want to take a moment to reflect on some of the things that I've pulled out of this research, but I'm also really looking forward to seeing what Phil has to say in a moment. Firstly, access interventions can enable more people than you think. So we've seen that there are significant barriers for the 56% of your audiences who are disabled. However, of the 44% who do not identify as disabled, a significant proportion also have access requirements. For example, over a quarter of non-disabled visitors had also used at least one of the physical access aids we listed, and 15% had used those related to adapted performances. So getting this right is going to affect the majority of people who are attending or who may like to attend. I was struck by Tim Rice's piece in The Guardian, arguing for all stage musicals to have captions, for example. Nearly 1 in 4 of all our under 35 respondents say they use captions when watching the TV. So surely this makes captions a really sensible addition for every performance, right? In a similar vein, venues such as Battersea Arts Centre have become relaxed venues across all their spaces and programmes, not just at specific times or for specific performances. Secondly, it occurs to me that the main challenges that we've identified in this research are things we can actually do something about and aren't necessarily expensive. The most obvious one being information. If 3/4 of disabled audiences are always looking for information before they visit, but a similarly high proportion are having difficulty in accessing it, we can do better on this. Do we have the right information and the right level of detail on our websites? Is it easy to find, particularly information about getting around the venue, transport options, and access from those transport options to our front doors, which came up a lot? Photos and videos are clearly really important, not just pages and pages of text. And maybe online chat would be useful for those specific questions from online bookers. I saw recently that the Principality Stadium in Cardiff has launched an accessible supporter guide to coincide with the Six Nations Rugby. And this allows fans to identify their needs up front, and then it clearly signposts and tailors suitable and detailed information for them. So following on from that, the next thing we can actually do something about and could be transformational is technology. We know that when we get technology right, it has the potential to be an enabler for disabled people, such as we saw in interval drinks ordering via apps and kiosks. However, at the same time, significant numbers of people are also finding technology challenging. And one of the reasons for that might be of our own making, asking people to jump through hoops. And I've used that metaphor, which is clearly just an excuse for me to put up a picture of a dog at this year's Crufts in Birmingham last week, jumping through a large green hoop. But hopefully you get the point. For example, nearly 80% of people say they've had to prove their eligibility, but then we make it really hard for them to do that. Over 90% of them said they found it hard through the booking process to tell organisations what their access needs were. It's our systems that are preventing people from doing what they want to, such as not being able to book accessible seats online, for example, pushing them into having to phone us, but then we put barriers up there too, as they end up waiting for phone support, or the staff or agency staff who deal with them haven't got the answers. Now, whilst tech could be the answer to a lot of these problems, it will need careful listening, consultation, and testing, of course, and we need to accept that it will not necessarily be a one-size-fits-all approach. But I would hope that by improving the information and the tech for the people who welcome it and do find it easy to use, we'll release, we'll release staff time to focus on the much smaller number of visitors who need that very bespoke attention in person or by phone. And of course, all of this contributes to poor perceptions and levels of confidence. 1 in 5 disabled people say that not being confident their needs would be met has actually stopped them going or taking a disabled person to a cultural venue or event. 1 in 5. That is a heck of a lot more people that would come to our venues if they were confident their needs would be met. And I think the key to this is it's something that we absolutely have to collaborate on. A bad experience at one venue may result in someone losing confidence in attending another cultural venue. So we all need to raise the tide so that all boats rise. We know from our work on Act Green and the work done by brilliant organisations such as the Theatre and Arts Green Books, the Family Arts Campaign, that having industry standards and a kite mark for specific audiences can be very powerful, so that people have consistency and reassurance of certain standards being met. So I'm really excited to see how the All In programme can develop to help catapult us all forwards on this. So I'm now briefly going to hand over to Phil Lofthouse from the All In team to give us his thoughts and reflections. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Katy, and really interesting to see the results from the Access Culture Survey. As a reminder, I'm Phil Lofthouse, the tech lead here at All In. I'm a white man in his 40s with light brown hair and a beard. I'm wearing a deep dark green cable knit jumper. I was struck with the sheer level of engagement we've seen from the general public on the survey. With over 12,700 validated responses, including 8,000 disabled respondents, this is a significant response on this important topic, with much useful insight for us all to digest. I fear that some of the more striking results, however, that Katy and Jacob just shared, may not come as a great surprise for many, especially customers with access requirements, who regularly experience creativity and culture, but often find unexpected barriers preventing them from engaging further. What may have come as more of a surprise to some of the people in the room is the level to which not being able to find relevant access information ahead of time is a barrier in itself. It would seem that even when the correct resources and effort have been put into providing relevant access provisions, our sector falls down at the very next hurdle of communicating those provisions in a clear way through the channels our customers expect. It seems that as a sector, sometimes our focus is so much on the bigger barriers that can't be removed without additional resources that we overlook the more manageable steps that we can take in our day-to-day work that could be just as transformative for our customers. The good news is that these are exactly the sorts of issues that All In is being developed to illuminate and help our sector to address. All In aims to help our sector remove barriers for disabled audiences and improve experiences of creativity and culture, standardise and improve access to venues, and to grow our disabled audiences. And through this, bring about the access transformation of the creative and cultural sector. All In will be providing tools to help address many of the issues highlighted by the results of the Access Culture Survey. Access Culture is not alone in highlighting the lack of consistency in how we provide access within our sector. And so All In will introduce the UK and Ireland's first accessibility standards for creativity and culture, developed in partnership with Attitude is Everything. These standards will show what good access in our sector should look like, and what we all should be considering to make our organisations and the experiences we provide as accessible as possible. But we know that sometimes a helping hand is required to understand and apply standards. So we will also provide subscribed organisations with guidance and skills development to help creative and cultural organisations meet the new standards. And let's not forget, there's a whole ecosystem of support organisations who can already help your organisation achieve your access ambitions. So All In will connect creative and cultural organisations with suppliers that can help improve access provisions. Many of them can already be found in our supplier directory, which is available on the All In website today. As highlighted in the Access Culture Survey, there's also real issues around communicating customers' access requirements to organisations, with 91% of disabled respondents still unable to fully communicate their access needs when booking online. That's why we're commissioning a digital system that allows disabled people to create a single access profile, which they can then use to securely share their access requirements with subscribed organisations. That'll help you to connect better with your existing audiences, and also find new audiences that maybe aren't yet familiar or confident in the access that your organisation is providing. And finally, We will provide insight and data to give organisations a better understanding of their audience's access requirements. It's really important that our sector has good quality data to help inform and shape our access provisions. And that's why we're really excited to team up with Indigo for the Access Culture Survey, as it's an important piece of research that helps shine a light on the state of play as your customers see it today. All In will be rolling out later in the year, and if you'd like to be kept up to date, you can express your interest at our website, allin.online, and we will keep you up to date via our mailing list. There's a QR code on the screen now. But for now, back to Katy.
Thank you, Phil. That's all so exciting. So just to recap on how you might use this data that we've shown you today. Well, firstly, if your organisation took part in the research, then look at your own results. You will have a link from us to do that. If you can't find it, let us know, we'll send it you again. And that will help you to prioritise the things that are most important to your audiences. If you didn't take part, you can still download the full report from our website when it's available later in the week. And thirdly, you could use the recording of this webinar, which we'll send out tomorrow, to start conversations in your organisation. Maybe send your colleagues the link to watch it, or better still, arrange a time where you can all watch it together, preferably with cake. And finally, measure your progress. This survey is hopefully a bit of a baseline for us all, so that we can repeat some of these questions and track progress over time. And if you're using our Indigo Share post-show tracker surveys, we're currently looking at how we can incorporate some measures of confidence for disabled audiences into those. If you're not part of those and you would like to be, please do contact Kerry Radden at Indigo, who can talk to you about it. So, thank you for listening to all of that. If you want to get in touch with us, those details on screen will help you to do that. And that just leaves plenty of time for a few questions. So I'm going to end the slides there and we can welcome everyone back on screen and see what we've had. Ellie, what have we had questions-wise?
Yes, thank you, Katy. So I think let's begin with a question for Phil, if that's okay. So we've had one attendee here saying that they've seen similar trends at their venue with accessible performances being attended by both those with access needs and non-disabled audiences. So they wanted to know, how can we be sure that audiences understand terms like captioned to mean closed captioned rather than something like surtitles, which are standard at opera performances?
I think this is a really good example of where standards for the sector come into play. I think at the moment, one of the reasons why audiences find it very difficult to necessarily understand what we mean so often when we're talking about access provisions is because we use different terminology in different circumstances. And what we need to do as a sector is kind of move more towards using a standardized set of terms so that people understand that when we say certain things, what those mean, and those are consistent across the venue. So you're not going from like one venue in a town to another venue in a town, and suddenly the same access provision means something completely different. So I think this is a really good opportunity where we, working as a sector, can move to a shared understanding about what access provisions are. In the specific of this question, however, the other thing is that making sure that we're being really clear with our communication on our website around what our access provisions mean. An awful lot of disabled visitors really appreciate having clear access guidance for the venues they're attending, and that's a really good opportunity for you to highlight exactly what you mean by different access provisions and make sure that they feel confident in what they're coming to experience when they come to visit you.
Thank you, Phil. I think the next one's probably best for Alex. So we've got one here. What sort of tech solutions do people find useful? So what are people using for things like drinks pre-ordering?
Thanks, Ellie. Just to introduce myself, I'm Alex Morgan, Head of Sales and Partnerships at pointOne. I'm a white man, currently wearing a white overshirt. So in regards to different technology usage that we're seeing across venues, in particular, at-seat ordering has been really popular. Whether this is offered to all patrons or just for accessible patrons, it can really help in terms of sometimes with not just sort of getting to the bar in that short 30-20 minute interval window for people with restrictions to their movement or in wheelchair. But also, I think it can be quite daunting. There can be quite a crush period within that bar, which, if there's a lot of people, can put people off even going and venturing down to there. And again, whether they need to go to the toilet in the interval. So we QR code systems, whether that's pointOne's own branded system. There are also partners that we integrate with what we call audience engagement products, two of which are Crowd Engage and Visit One. Customers can also use those where they've received a text message with a link where they can either pre-order their interval drinks ahead of the performance or for pre-show, but also for at-seat ordering as well. Venues where I've seen that this has been really used really well are such as Hull Theatres. So the team, Joseph Zendis, the operations manager there, has shown great financial benefits to the venue, as well as great feedback from accessible patrons as well. And also the Minack Theatre down on the coast. For any of you who know that venue, it's pretty unique in the fact that it's an outdoor venue and there are challenges getting around that. So they've implemented QR code ordering with pointOne, but only for their accessible patrons. I think the other things as well as sort of QR code ordering, which has relatively high take-up rates, are also self-service kiosks. One of the bits of information that came out of the previous survey around self-service venues and the self-service report was that, and I didn't realise this, and maybe this is my my naivety, but people with neurodiversity or they much preferred the ability to order via a self-service kiosk, which is probably no surprise, rather than actually having to go up and order, with a queue of people behind them, maybe reciting their order in their head before they go. So one of the things that came out of that survey was around self-service kiosks being a really good method for patrons to use. But I think what I would just sort of say before finishing on that point is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I very much think that by offering those services for either QR code ordering or self-service kiosks, people who want to use them can use them, but maybe people who are not comfortable using that technology, the staff have got more time to actually super serve that customer and actually guide them through the process as well. So I definitely would say, it's not sort of pushing people that this is the only ordering method, but by providing that option, you're providing a solution for hopefully as much as the population as possible.
Great, thanks so much, Alex. Okay, next up, I think a question for Katy. So, have you analysed the data to look at any other differences by region or type of venues or events?
Well, we have, and actually we haven't seen very much difference. There really weren't any significant differences by either region or types of venues or events, other than those ones that we listed around some types of venues being generally perceived as being more accessible than others. But in terms of the cuts of the data, we did cut it in multiple ways, and there were not significant differences. So we haven't included that in the report for that reason. So I'm sorry if you're looking for differences, but they're not there.
And again for Phil, this one. So about All In, with the creation of accessibility standards through All In, will there be a standardized access discount recommended to partner venues? And what will this be? Maybe a free companion ticket is what they suggested.
This is definitely within the scope of the work we're doing on the standards. I would say this probably fits within the customer service standards, which are currently in active development between All In and Attitudes Everything. More details to come on what the detail of that will be. I don't want to preempt what will be in those, but yeah, this is exactly the sort of thing where we're currently looking at best practice across the sector, where the differences and similarities are in what we're currently doing, and we will certainly be kind of like making recommendations around these sorts of areas.
Thanks, Phil. We've got a sort of call for advice here, and I'll put this out to everyone, and feel free to answer. So this person has says that they offer relaxed visiting times at their museums and have been working to promote them. And they would love to better understand if we're successfully welcoming target audiences, as well as finding out what people think of the relaxed experience. But they struggle to find a suitable evaluation approach that doesn't exclude people who don't identify as having access needs. Would anyone have any advice for them?
I mean, I think, again, it's one of those examples of one size doesn't fit all. And we found, in terms of trying to, and we did this with this research as well, actually trying to encourage people to fill this in either on behalf of people, or we offered easy read versions, different formats of the survey, different ways of engaging with it. I think it's about trying to experiment with, and this is something we're learning a lot about at the moment, experimenting with different ways of trying to gather evaluation from people, and accepting that, you know, you might not be able to get the full 20-question survey responded to by everybody, but actually asking the 3 most important questions in an easy read format, or in some way that you can gather those responses, could be as valuable, and trying to get those looked at. But it is something that I'm hoping that we can be working alongside All In with as part of this as well, to kind of how we measure these things, how we evaluate success, again, in a very accessible way, and coming up with new tools and methods for doing that is going to be part of this journey as well. But it's not straightforward. You're right. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Phil.
I mean, I think, I would agree with everything you said there, Katy. I suppose the thinking about the kind of like the question here, I suppose one really key thing here is offering people the opportunity to tell you that they're not going to be able to engage with your method of feedback. If you are putting out a survey, offering people the ability to inform you if that's not going to work for them, and then kind of having a tailored approach if there are voices that you want to make sure you've got into the room. And certainly in this case, I think you've got halfway towards identifying that there are people that won't be able to fill in a survey. So it's almost then becomes a question of understanding the best way of collecting that feedback and adding it in, so that you're kind of including more people in a way that you can then also include them in the results in an effective way. Because I think that's one really key thing is making sure that however you've gathered the data, that you can then actually compare the data correctly with other means that you've collected it through.
Thanks both. So I think we'll say this is the last question coming up. We've had so many good questions. Thank you, everyone. And we'll try and think of a way to sort of compile these and perhaps supply the answers somewhere post-session today. But for now, I think we'll go with a question for Katy again. Sorry, Katy. This person says, it's a great level of responses from disabled audiences, which is great. Were disabled respondents targeted in any particular way in this survey?
Well, I mean, we're delighted with the number of responses that we've had from people who identify as disabled, and I think what we've learned from it is actually it's one of those things as well, is actually just making sure we ask the right people is the first step. Obviously, making sure that information is in various formats, which we did. Working with All In to make sure that we tested the functionality and the usability and the language used in the survey to make sure it was as inclusive as possible. And then it's all credit to the organisations that sent it out or got it out to their audiences, because it was up to them, it was up to the individual organisations to basically use the tools that we sent them to try and ask their audiences for feedback. So however you all did that, you did a great job. And we need to keep doing it. So thank you. But as I say, we're learning as we go along with this as well, and very keen for any other suggestions and thoughts on how we can make those responses even higher. But yeah, we're really delighted with the response that we got.
Great. Just to say, Phil, there's lots of great questions on All In and the specifics around it. So I wonder, did you want to put a contact in the the chat for everyone or a website link?
Yes. Yes, I haven't got it to hand, so give me a moment.
Okay, no worries.
But yeah, certainly, I know you've seen lots of other extra questions coming in on the various channels. So, what we'll do is also try and pick up some of those questions after the session as well, so we can get back to people if we can identify people. But for now, like I say, a lot of information about All In is available on our website, which is All In Online, and I'll pop that in the chat now. And we will be communicating more about what All In will involve over the course of the year. We are heading towards the point of rolling out All In. We're still in development at the moment, so we've not got the answers to all the questions in a shiny font just yet. But over the course of the next few months, we will definitely be communicating a lot more information about All In. Certainly some of the questions which have been in the chat, we've got the answers to those that we'll be communicating as they become available. But yes, would highly recommend everyone to join our mailing list, express your interest on our website, and that would be the route that we then pick up conversations with people.
Great, thank you. So I think that just leaves it to me to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Ellie for managing the questions so well. Thank you to the Indigo team, to Jacob. Thank you so much to Alex and pointOne again for your sponsorship. Thanks to everyone at All In, and thank you to our BSL interpreters. And most importantly, thank you to hundreds of you who are on there today. Thank you for taking part. Thank you for joining us today. And we very much hope that, that this is the start of a much more accessible future for our venues. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all. Cheers.